I'm Dustin Roths. I was born in St. Francis, Kansas, lived most of my life in Ransom, Kansas, and about a decade in Hays, kind of a small town, western Kansas farm kid. I started my business about 6 years ago, married my wife a couple years ago, and now have a little baby boy. He's about 6 months old right now. Like I said, I started my business about 6 years ago, and I've grown out of that location twice, and now I'm in my bigger store. It's on Main Street. Basically my career in business has been successful thus far, and I kind of felt like maybe I was worth it to Hays to have a little bit more from me than just being the little skinny jeweler on Main Street. So I decided I would put my name in the race with a little bit of encouragement from a few people that wanted me to be a part of the city government. The family farm was passed on to my brother. He bought it from my grandfather. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had his own business for quite a while, and now works in oil field supplies. But knowing that I didn't want to stay on the farm my whole life, and knowing that it wouldn't be real accessible to me since my brother, who's a little older, wanted to, I knew I needed to figure something out. I always knew I wanted to own my own business and do my own thing and kind of, pave my own path in life. It just kind of, I worked a little bit in college for a jeweler and had some success, and eventually tried to figure out a way that I could do something on my own. I went to Fort Hays State and in marketing, and like I say, I went working at a jewelry store here in town. I eventually managed a jewelry store in Manhattan and managed a jewelry store in Overland Park, a real high-end jeweler in Overland Park. But being a person that came from a town of 300 people to Kansas City, it was just a little bit too big for what I wanted. And I always knew I wanted to do my own thing anyway, so Hays was a natural fit for me. I knew so many people already around here, and thought that even with all the jewelers that there were at the time, that maybe I could get a niche of that market and grow my company. I've always been interested in politics, more on a national, state level. I have quite a few friends that are in politics, from state legislatures and stuff like that. So my interest was there. It was just a matter of getting my business to a point where I felt like I didn't need to give all my time and devotion to it. Whenever you have a small business, you really got to get it turned into a machine before you can. It's like a baby. You've got to take care of it just like that for until it's grown to where it can take care of itself a little bit. And finally seeing that I had a great staff, and that I could probably get away and do some stuff that wasn't directly related to the store. It just kind of was a natural fit. And like I said, I had actually had people in multiple elections ask me if I would be interested in things, and at that point I was in no situation with the business to do that. And now that I've gotten to that point, I feel like I can get away from it a little bit and not have everything just fall apart with the business. So. That's probably our biggest concern as a community with the downturn in the oil and ag markets the last few years, is diversifying our economy, continuing to build our retail. Just those type of things, of course, they come up all the time with people. That was partially, hopefully with some experience with me as a retailer. We're always thinking about trying to get more retail in Hays, and I hope I can give a perspective from a retailer of how to do that. What can be done as far as lowering the tax burden on companies and things of that nature. The main thing for us is we're running our campaign on conservatism, growth, and liberty. And so our hope is that we can use that and get elected by people that want those type of things. Last thing I want is to be elected and then have people coming to me not knowing initially how I felt about things. So yeah, we'll probably do a little bit of knocking on the door type stuff. I'm naturally a marketer, so with my campaign, I thought, hey, there's some unique ways that I can get my name out there and try and get voters to show up at the polls. I mean, me personally, I've always had a conservative leaning. I've been a Republican, registered Republican since I could vote. I think conservatism just lends toward growth. If you can be fiscally conservative as a government, you see things happen in Texas and Florida and Utah. You see their economies grow above and beyond states around them, and it's mainly because it attracts business. So, that's definitely my political leaning, and it's why I've kind of went that direction with my campaign. I would rather people vote for me knowing I'm conservative than have them think something differently and not be excited about the way I would like our city government to go. My hope is that I can get in there, use some problem-solving skills. Over 6 years of running a small business, I've honed some problem-solving skills, and I hope that we can get in there. I can look real closely at budgets and where things are spent, and do whatever I can to save taxpayers money and put it back in their pocket. It's always been my contention that people spend their money better than government ever would, and as long as we can keep as much in the pockets of the people that are here in Hays, the better our economy will do. My biggest complaint, I would say, is just is keeping where we're ready. When opportunities present themselves as a community, make sure that we're opening these possibilities with open arms and figuring out a way for these companies or people to be successful in Hays. You can never really just force economic growth. It kind of has to be a natural growth process. But as long as, my hope is that people want me across the table with potential people that come to our town and they see that I was able to be successful in business here and maybe that, they could be successful, and then help them in whatever way that we can and get them in our community, grow our community over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I've always been a very libertarian-minded person in general. I want people to be able to do their own things with their own property. Liberty is just a principle that I think our entire country was founded on, and it was something that I wanted to be at the forefront with. I think that leaving people alone to do what they want to do with their own stuff is the best way to go. I would definitely love to get rid of some regulation in zoning and things of that nature. It's tough to be real specific on it right away, but it's definitely something I will look at immediately is, can we get rid of some of the regulation that maybe is keeping people away? And in that same thought process is, almost always for sure there's some regulation that isn't needed, and can we get some of the old regulation out of the way? So for sure I will look into that kind of stuff immediately if I get elected to office. The thing is, right now commercial property is pretty hard to find. It's pretty hard to buy. It's relatively expensive comparative to some other cities that are our size throughout the Midwest. And there's all kinds of things that cause that. It's not just the idea of what city government may be doing. It can be unique aspects of our economy, like the oil money within our economy and things of that nature that cause that. But that's my hope, is if we can deregulate some of those things, if we can figure out a way to incentivize and get business here, I think we'll all do better in the long run. That growth and prosperity is important for all of us, in our homes, in our houses, in our businesses, all those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion should be around property taxes and trying to get property taxes lower. That being said, though, I mean, the city doesn't levy much of a property tax comparative to, say, county and school. But as long as the conversations are always in that direction, that's the direction I will try to point conversations is how can we save money? As far as small businesses, startup businesses, things like mine that are first-generation entrepreneurial startups, property tax can be the biggest detriment. If you have a good business or good location and your property taxes are too high, it's something you have to pay regardless of income. And so unless you're well capitalized, unless you're you have good banking, you can run into cash flow issues immediately, and it's the plight of small business. It's 90% of businesses are out of businesses within 5 years, and as long as we can continue to keep that competitive and low, businesses will stay and thrive and grow, and if we can and it gets out of control, those businesses have every reason to go to another community that will do that for them. I think that's the key for sure, is as long as the conversation is going in the right direction, as long as there's people that are saying the type of things that I'm saying, it'll at least be in the back of the head of anybody who may be involved in levying those taxes. Most definitely, that's my intention. I love conversation. I love debate. I mean, I think it brings out the best ideas, and at least with debate, it allows people to think about who may or may not be right, and get the discussion going in a direction that the community wants. I grew up in a really conservative household, but I've always considered myself a student of economics. I love the study of economics, and having those conservative roots, maybe I've gone slightly more libertarian as I've grown in my political career, but in terms of economics, it's just hardened my ideas of less government, limited spending, and just taking off the backs of entrepreneurs and capitalists that burden of government. That's really my political ideology. Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about it. It's one of those things that it's so funny when you start running for city commission. You start getting a lot of the information about the R9 Ranch, information about the project. I look at the dollar figure and I see a very big number, but I also have to look at long-term, what is a good investment for Hays. I'm a little concerned about it. I'm not a huge advocate for the idea, but I know and trust that people that are smarter than me about things like water and moving it across multiple county lines have looked into all of these things. I also know that we may be looking at a legal battle when we do it. Once again, I love to use my problem-solving skills and see what other alternatives may be available, but I don't want to be negative about the R9 Ranch. That could be the best project and the most viable and exactly what we need. But I also hate to make emotional decisions about anything. Sometimes you get into drought conditions and things look very bleak, and then you don't, and then you get out of it, and you realize, hey, maybe if we would have spent a whole bunch of money when we were just worried about something that probably wasn't going to sustain forever, would have been a bad economic and fiscal mistake. Altogether, I'm not positive or negative on the R9 Ranch. I would just say I would love to take a closer look at it and spend a little time thinking of some alternatives. before we jump into a $75 million project. You know, I've looked through the budget. I think we run a relatively tight ship at the city. You know, I'd love to look at it even closer. I'd love to have the opportunity to be at the table when we discuss these things. My hope is that we can save taxpayers money. So immediately I will take closer looks at all those things and start trying to find alternatives, better ways of spending our money, being better stewards of taxpayer money. But nothing in particular, you know, that I've spotted that would cause for alarm. Once again, you know, you start running for city commission, and I am not an expert on traffic and how traffic flows. I would say right now I'm pretty negative on them. I don't like the idea of them right now, and the reason for that is I feel like if we could divert traffic to our other exits and ease that exit from some of its traffic, we might not have any problem there. Right now there is a problem there, but things like truck stops at the other exits would most likely diversify some of that traffic to other exits, and we might just see that alleviates itself, possibly through some economic growth. I think the future is very positive for Hays. You know, obviously with agriculture changing, the less need for human beings to be on farms because of efficiencies, I think Hays will naturally grow for that reason. Sadly, to the peril of a lot of the small towns around us, but when economic opportunity is in our city and it's not in theirs, we'll probably naturally have some percentage of growth. My hope is that we can amplify that we can attract people that aren't just from directly around us, and that we can diversify our economy and find places for people to work with high-paying jobs. I always say I don't want to just grow the community for growing it. I want to grow GDP. I want to grow the ability for people to make money and have a good living. And I think economic prosperity is probably the #1 way a person can live a good, fulfilling life and be able to do the things they want to do. I think manufacturing-wise would, you know, if we can attract some manufacturing to Hays, like I said, with that smaller need for people on farms, we're going to have a lot of able-bodied people that might be great at building things and doing things of that nature. So, you know, I'd love to diversify into more manufacturing, like Wheelchairs of Kansas, like A1 Plank, Rands, you know, those kind of companies that, you know, obviously our college, our hospital, you know, our oil industry, our ag industry are our biggest contributors to our economy right now. But if we can diversify into those other things, it just keeps it so that when we have downturns in the oil and ag market, we don't get hit so heavily economically as a community. My hope is that they see a business person, conservative person, that they want to represent them in front of potential businesses and potential people that would want to come to our community. I hope I could, you know, I hope and pray that I would be as good of a steward of how great of people Hays has. You know, we're just wonderful people, and if I can come across that way to potential businesses, I think that would have been my #1 reason why I wanted to come to Hays. I didn't look at taxes or things of that nature when I came. It was just that I wanted to be a part of this great community.